Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our celebration of Lahiri Mahashaya's life and presence in our lives. And we will begin shortly, but let's just meditate for a minute or so before we do the opening prayer. Let's offer a prayer together now. Divine Mother,
Divine Mother,
Heavenly Father,
Heavenly Father,
beloved friend God,
beloved friend God,
great masters
great masters
of self-realization, Jesus Christ,
Jesus Christ,
Babaji Krishna,
Babaji Krishna,
beloved Lahiri Mahashaya,
beloved Lahiri Mahashaya,
Swami Sri Yukteswarji,
Swami Sri Yukteswarji,
beloved Guru,
beloved Guru,
Paramhansa Yoganandaji,
Paramhansa Yoganandaji,
all saints and sages,
all saints and sages,
humbly we bow at thy feet.
humbly we bow at thy feet.
Divine Mother,
Divine Mother,
beloved Lahiri,
beloved Lahiri,
guide our lives
guide our lives
into perfect bliss,
into perfect bliss,
that we may know thee
that we may know thee
and become one with thee.
and become one with thee.
Om, peace.
Peace.
Amen. So this evening, we will share together a number of chants. We've decided to pick up an aspect of Lahiri Mahashaya's life and his history that we haven't emphasized typically, but it is an aspect of his life. He was raised in a family that were Shiva devotees, and so we'll do a number of Shiva chants in honor of that this evening. And mainly we want to honor the blessings that he has brought to our lives through our gurus, Swami Sri Yukteswar and Yogananda, and especially Kriya Yoga, and the bliss that freedom from the body and freedom from just the binding karma, the binding identification with ego and personality that Kriya gives us automatically. We are eternally grateful for that. We've invited Lahiri's Murti into our little temple this evening, and so it's a blessing to have him here in that form as well. And so we'll chant a little bit. We'll have a short meditation. We'll have little short meditations between the chants, just a few seconds though. But then we'll have one little one, and then Nirmala will read some stories, which will be unique this evening. We've chosen stories that I think you will not have heard before. And I'm going to keep you in suspense on that. We won't go any further till the moment of. But then we'll chant again and have a few more stories. And I'll speak a little more about Lahiri later on. And so that will be our evening. And we want to especially feel as we do this evening, as we share this evening, we want to send the energy of this evening far beyond our little group who may be watching right now. These videos typically go up on YouTube and stay there, and actually lots and lots of people from all over the world can watch them at a more convenient, in Europe, for example, it's the wee hours of the night right now. It's awkward for them to watch, and it's early morning in India. It's not sort of business hours on a Saturday in India yet. So people get to tune into this all over. So feel that your energy and your connection with it is also very important. Not just Dharmadas and Nirmala. This is all of us together sharing a blessing with the world. Just as Lahiri himself shared a blessing. I don't think his living room was much bigger than our little, this is a living room of an apartment, a small apartment. And I don't think his was much bigger than this. And look at the changes in the world that came from it. It's just incredible. Literally the millions of people who have been touched and impacted by the blessing of his life. So we honor that this evening, and we'll chant together. Because this is one of our gurus, I'll begin by the chanting the invocation to the guru. Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Deva Maheshwara, Gurur Sakshat Parabrahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Brahmanandam Paramasukadam Kevalam Yanamurti Dandvatitam Gagana Sadrisham Tattvamasam Ekam Nityam Bhimalamachalam Sarvadeye Shakshibhutam Bhavatitam Trigunarahitam Sadgurum Tam Namami Evamata Chapita Tvameva Bandhu Chasaka Tvameva Vidya Dravina Tvameva Sarvam Namo Deva Deva Tvameva Sarvam Namo Deva Deva.
I don't seem to have that chant here.
It's right there, honey. Om Kali.
Where?
I'm looking at it. It's to your left. Right there. Keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going.
Oh.
Om Guru, Om Guru, Om. Shiva is the aspect of God that is in charge of all the gurus in the world, in a sense, or in charge of the guru principle, which is the bringer of light, the illuminator of our darkness. And so we'll chant several Shiva chants now. The first of them, Jaya Guru, Shiva Guru. Jaya Guru Shiva Guru Hari Guru Jagat Guru Param Guru Sadguru Jaya Guru Shiva Guru Hari Guru Jagat Guru Param Sadguru Hari Guru Advaita Guru Chit Guru Chitra Guru Chinmaya Guru Hari Guru Advaita Guru Chit Guru Chitra Guru Chinmaya Guru Jaya Guru Shiva Guru Hari Guru Jaya Guru Param Guru Sadguru Jaya Guru Shiva Guru Hari Guru Jaya Guru Param Guru Sadguru Hari Guru Advaita Guru Chit Guru Chitra Guru Chinmaya Guru Hari Guru Advaita Guru Chit Guru Chitra Chinmaya Guru Jaya Guru Shiva Guru Hari Guru Jagat Guru Sadguru Hari Guru 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 Chinmaya Guru Guru Ananda Guru Chit Guru Chinmaya Guru Jaya Guru Shiva Guru Hari Guru Jagat Guru Param Guru Sadguru Jaya Guru Shiva Guru Hari Guru Jagat Guru Param Guru Sadguru Jaya Guru Shiva Guru Hari Guru Jagat Guru Param Sadguru Nirmala's going to share several stories now from the life of Lahiri Mahashaya.
And I am reading from a book you may not have seen before. This is a book, maybe Dharmadas can zoom in on the cover a little bit so you can see it. We often tell stories from the autobiography of a yogi, but tonight I'll be reading from this book.
Just say the title.
Yogi Raj Sri Shama Churn Lahiri, a complete biography.
Okay.
Would you get me some water?
Yeah.
So this first story I have told somewhat recently. I think I read this story on Babaji Commemoration Day, but it's so beautiful. I wanted to just tell it again. Lahiri's family was, as Dharmadas was saying, great Shiva devotees. And Lahiri's mother was very devoted to Shiva. And she took her young son with her to the temple to meditate and worship and do puja. And Lahiri, even as a tiny little guy, would put himself in the same posture as the Shiva statue, and he would sit very still and he would worship Shiva, even as a little toddler. So one day, I think Lahiri was maybe 3 or 4 years old, and he was in the temple worshiping Shiva with his mother when suddenly a sannyasin entered the temple. And Muktakeshi Devi, Lahiri's mother, was unnerved by this, to have this sadhu come in so suddenly. And he was a large, well-built, handsome, young, powerful sadhu. And she immediately lifted her baby onto her lap, and she didn't quite know what to do. And this sannyasin addressed her and said, "Mother, do not be afraid. I am a sannyasin. There's nothing to be afraid about with me." But she grabbed her baby and she stood up. She was so taken aback by this person. And the sannyasin stated, and we assume this is Babaji speaking to her, "That son of yours, mother, is not an ordinary human child. It is I who have sent him to this earth to show the esoteric path of sadhana, spiritual practices, to countless people who are distressed with worries and the woes of family life. This child himself will maintain a family existence and attract others to practice yoga sadhana. Mother, you have nothing to fear. I shall constantly keep watch upon him like a shadow." And Muktakeshi Devi passed away when Lahiri Mahashaya was about 5 years old. So he lost his mother at this very early age. And I can't tell all the stories in this wonderful book. There's many stories of miracles and Just beautiful, beautiful stories about Lahiri's life. But I will just say that when he was 18 years old, he was married, and it was it was a difficult life. He was posted many times. He was part of the army, and so he would send back his salary to his wife, who was very, very frugal. And uh, but they had a very stringent budget. It was money was not easy. When his father left the world, he had several brothers, and a family dispute ensued. So this was very against Lahiri Mahashaya's nature. He didn't want to be around disharmony. His whole mission had been to bring peace into the world. And so this was very challenging and unpleasant for him and his wife. They didn't have any children yet. One assumes the dispute was over the family home and who would get to live there, and all the brothers and their wives together, and who knows what all was going on. But the biographer here is saying that it was an important moment in Lahiri Mahashaya's life for us, because strife and disharmony and dealing with lawsuits amidst family members, all kinds of things happen in families that is just so disheartening and so upsetting, because these are relatives, these are people that are close to you biologically. They're they share DNA. It's these are the people in the world that we are bound to in some ways. And it was important for Lahiri Mahashaya to set an example even in this. And so God arranged this scenario where he would have to try to be harmonious in a very disharmonious situation. And so money somehow was involved, and we don't have all the details of it, but what we know is that Lahiri put up with this. He maintained this existence meticulously in order to confer onto humanity this example. And then my interpretation of it was he decided the money was not important and he left and he got his own place. He spent a short while amidst this family discord that had plagued him, after which he decided to rent a portion of a 2-story home, and he resided there. The subsistence of his family then depended upon his inadequate salary and small income from private tuitions. So his salary in the army was a pittance, and it was inadequate for renting a house, keeping a wife, and then he subsequently had 5 children, 3 daughters and 2 sons. And through all of this, in addition to practicing his yoga sadhana, he took other students. He was very highly educated, very learned, and he taught languages and other subjects to the Maharaja's children. And so he earned a little bit of money, 5 rupees a month sometimes, in these tuitions in order to help support his family. His family was being maintained on this unsubstantial income. This also is another aspect of educating the masses. He demonstrated to mankind that despite financial stringency, one can gradually construct one's life and advance towards sadhana. And as the Gita says, what is performed by great men, the common man imitates. So it's very important for great souls to be very meticulous in their lives, because other people who are learning from them will emulate them, they will imitate them. And so I'll just read one more little story here. I have often read the story of Lahiri meeting Babaji, the defining moment of his life. And I won't give all the details of that. It's so beautifully written in Autobiography of a Yogi. On this day, it would be auspicious if you were to reread that passage, because it's very, very beautiful. But this is a little bit more of their conversation that during Lahiri's initiation, that gives more background to that story and autobiography. So Babaji is saying, family men desire to practice sadhana, remaining within the family, but they are plagued by problems and possess very little time. We know how that is in our modern life. Therefore, you, Lahiri, will have to show them this yoga sadhana, which is facile, simple, unostentatious, and effective Kriya Yoga. It is because of this you have descended to this earth. You cannot forget this mission. Lahiri made a humble prayer to Babaji as to how he would possibly be able to engage in austere sadhana amidst the vortex of life's activities. He had said to Babaji after Kriya initiation in his samadhi, he said, I will leave everything. I don't want to go back to family and job and home and all those responsibilities. Let me just stay here with you and go deep in yoga sadhana. So to live in the world and practice yoga, this seemed impossible for Lahiri, as he would have no time. Doesn't it sound familiar, having no time? Babaji again said, that is not correct. Return to your family. Return to your family life, and you will find that there is enough time. You yourself, by maintaining a family existence, will attain spiritual fulfillment. For only then your ideals will be acceptable to family people. Also bear in mind, and I love this part, also bear in mind that the material world cannot be renounced. None has ever been able to do so. Wherever man resides, the material world stays with him. Besides this, it is the men and women belonging to the family precincts who have made this world so beautiful and endowed it with so much wealth and prosperity. The world would not have been so beautiful without the contribution of these people. If there had been no family existence, the creation of the Absolute would have waned. Everybody is born in this family existence. Sadhana, spiritual practices, is not for renouncers only. For example, The container from which I drink water is also a contribution of the non-renouncer. Babaji continued sympathetically. Family men and women today are not finding any means to make the quest for God. By remaining within the family, you, Lahiri, will show them the true path. You have nothing to be perturbed about returning to your family life. Let a sadhana-oriented householder be established in this way. And so let us take heart from these words of Babaji and follow the practice of Lahiri Mahashaya. Babaji said to Lahiri that whenever you need me, I will be there. And these great souls, all of our gurus, they are always right there. I'll just tell one small story from my own life, which is that I was blessed to be on a 3-month tour with Swami Kriyananda, a group of singers, and I. Prem and his mother Kalyani were also on that tour with me in 1978 or 79. And we went all through the United States and Canada. It was a wonderful period of time in my life. And we all had different jobs that we did. And my job was keeping track of the money, especially the book sales and the inventory of the books, trying to make what we had in money at the end of the evening match what we thought we had sold that night. It was quite a testy job in the midst of all the traveling and all the performing and all the talking to people and being with people that we needed to do, all the cooking and cleanup and laundry and all the aspects of life. We had no time and we still had to meditate. But at the end of that tour, I remember the night before we arrived back home, and I would have to turn over all of my bookkeeping for that tour. I stayed up hours and hours trying to make everything reconcile, trying to make all the book money match the inventory and all of it. It was a complete nightmare. And I remember, as I say, 1 or 2 in the morning, maybe even later, just not knowing what else to do. I could not make it work. And Master says that there is a very blessed moment between waking consciousness and sleeping consciousness. There's that very delicate moment of super consciousness. And if we can find that moment and dive into it, that's where we get our answers. That's when God can come to us most easily. Well, because I was so sleepy and because I was trying so hard to stay awake, I think I was able to pray in that super conscious state long enough to pray to Lahiri Mahashaya, who worked in the world as a bookkeeper, as an accountant. And I prayed fervently, Sri Lahiri, you have to help me. You know how to do this stuff. I don't. I don't know why they chose me to do this job because I'm not really a bookkeeper. but I was doing my best. Please help me, Lahiri. And I prayed and meditated, and then I looked at it again, and I made sense. It made sense. It was perfect. It all reconciled. And within minutes, I was able to pack it all up, and the next day I could just give it away. I was so grateful not to have that responsibility anymore. But if we bring God into everything that we do, we will find that these great masters are waiting to help us. God is waiting to help us. This is a Om Namah Shivaya chant that Swami Kriyanandaji, lists in the Raja Yoga course. It's a very beautiful one. Om Namah Shivaya, 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 Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya, 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 Om Namah Shivaya. is another Shiva chant that we love. This was written by Haridas, an Ananda member who now lives in India with his wife Rama. Om Namah Shivaya, 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 Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya, 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 Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya, 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 Om Namah Shivaya.
Hey Shiva Shankara Namo Shankara Shiva Shankara Hey Shiva Shankara I'll just share a few thoughts about Lahiri and how to sort of connect with him in our lives, in our daily lives. And what we don't necessarily gather, we can easily make the assumption that because Lahiri was an avatar, is an avatar, that therefore he sort of never had to deal with anything. And that just isn't, it's neither true nor helpful. And this is part and parcel of Babaji sending him back from the Himalayas to all of us, essentially, and of course to his own family, who I'm sure would have suffered significantly had he not returned. And what we see is he had to live the life that we all have to live, which is to say that he had to make compromises. He had to political party, and then you get together at Thanksgiving, and it's a big explosion about what didn't happen, what should have happened, who agrees with what, and it's just a big problem. There's an endless number of opportunities for us to be peacemakers in this world, and to find, Lahiri, think of Lahiri's situation. He's a yogi at heart, although he didn't know it when he got into his career, but he goes to the Himalayas. He has this incredible experience, meets Babaji, gets initiated into Korea. He goes into samadhi for a week. He's just like, I'm ready to just leave it all behind. This is so real and so powerful and so magnetic. How could I ever leave to go back to my family? And Babaji says, no, you have to go. And then think of the situation that he goes back to. He now works again. He continues to work for the British Army. He's an accountant for one of the divisions of the British Army. So they're occupying the country. He's helping them do their accounting for them. And what an odd situation to be in. And he's earning very little. It's a very great challenge to make ends meet. And he has to navigate all of that with children on the way, children growing up. And as I think we all know, children are not free or even cheap, they're quite expensive. And I'm sure that some of those realities must have been the same in India. They didn't have smartphones to buy for their kids. And I mean, there's a lot of things they didn't have to do, but there were a lot of things they did have to do. Lahiri himself had an English education, which was very unusual for those times. It's even still rather unusual in India. In Indian villages, it's very uncommon for kids to get educated in English. And so, and in 100 odd years ago, almost 200 years ago, when he was being educated, it would have been extremely unusual. So, you think of navigating all that, and his role was to serve, his role was to help. And so we can look to him just as Nirmala was saying in her story about having to do accounting, a role and a job that she was unfamiliar with and not particularly comfortable with. We all get to do different jobs that we're not particularly comfortable with either. We all get to deal with compromising situations that we have to kind of find the middle ground. We have to find a way to work it out. And we can look to Lahiri as the one who shows us how to do that in daily life, how to live a life that is uplifted and uplifting both, and how to navigate all that, because it's not easy. It's not designed to be easy. We got to watch Swami working with this, working with us householders as Ananda was shifting away from a more monastic emphasis in the 70s to a, I wouldn't say a more householder emphasis, but at least a balanced householder emphasis in the 1980s. It did kind of shift to emphasize householders for a while there. But Swamiji working with us, he understood families have their own needs. Families have their own reality. We had built, for example, just one example, we had built all these group homes at Ananda and shared one big shared kitchen among lots of single people and some families mixed in with kids as well. And practice and experience led us to understand that families need their own space. They need their own kind of defined dinner time that's not just kind of a catch as catch can with a whole house full of people who are all headed in different directions. And so they were better off having their own home, separate home or apartment. And that's just one little example of trying to work with the realities of householders. But Lahiri gave us a very practical example of that. And so let's tune into him and his presence and blessings in our life and honor the grace. Losing your mother when you're 5 years old, that's very difficult. His family home washed away when the Ganges River changed course and the whole thing was swept into the river. I mean, it's like it was pretty darn challenging all the way down. So anyway, let's honor and bless and draw his uh, comforting grace into our lives in all the situations that we run into, which we think are so extraordinary. And he's been through all of them and much more. So, do you want to read your next little batch of stories?
Okay.
And then we'll finish with kirtan. So, Nirmala will read another few stories, including whatever I was about to step on there.
Well, you could have gone ahead. I shouldn't have interrupted you.
Well, I don't know what I was going to say, and I don't know what you're going to read. So we'll let me be surprised too.
Well, Lahiri was married in 1863, and his eldest son was born in that rented house that I told you about a few minutes ago, where he finally escaped from the family discord, even though it put him in a very difficult financial position. But I wanted to just read about his wife a little bit. She was 9 years younger than he, and their fathers were friends, and she would often come to Lahiri's home as a little girl to play and visit with her father. And so the family women folk would tease her and say, "Now, who are you going to marry when you grow up?" And even as a little girl, she would point to Lahiri and say, "I'm going to marry him." He was very handsome, and he was 9 years older, but eventually she did marry Lahiri. Kashimani Devi was an extremely quiet, compassionate, and accomplished housewife. We only hear that one story in autobiography where she sort of nags Lahiri and is concerned about money because they need more of it. They have 5 children. And Lahiri says to her, "What can a nothing like me, how can a nothing like me create wealth for you?" And he disappears. And she is extremely taken aback. And then she notices that he's meditating up near the ceiling in lotus posture. And she begs him to come down and resume being a human. And she apologizes for not realizing his divinity. So that's the only story of her that we have. And of course, to end that story, to finish it, Lahiri says, "Don't worry, one of my disciples will help." And it all worked out. But she had been dealing with this lack of funds their entire married life. Lahiri's family had been well to do, but as Dharmadas said, their family home was swept away in a flood. And Lahiri's mother was his father's second wife. And as we have heard, she passed away when Lahiri was just 5 years old. And this had a profound effect on Lahiri's father. He had loved his wives, and to have both of them pass away just disheartened him. He didn't have any energy to take care of his real estate where his money was, and it fell into disrepair, and so it was a very difficult situation. Anyway, Kashimani was a very accomplished housewife. Despite the acute financial stringency, she managed the household affairs with supreme patience. By virtue of her judiciousness and sound domestic management, she saved from her husband's petty income enough to purchase a house. And that's where their children were born. That's where he passed away many years later. Kashimani never spent time idly. Early in the morning, she would herself grant alms to any beggar who came to the house. She believed that beggars did not approach the house of the unfortunate. So her anxiety was very great to make sure that she gave to beggars because that meant her house was fortunate. She herself would perform all the household chores as the income of her husband was limited. Guests and newcomers would frequent her house. She would cook and serve all to their entire satisfaction. And by she was a very pious lady, and she acquired longevity by practicing yoga sadhana in which she had been initiated by her husband. She arrived at the culmination of sadhana and departed consciously at the age of 94. So she was a very, very high soul. And I just wanted to briefly tell the story of the photograph of Lahiri Mahashaya. Now, what we see on the altar is a painting that was done by that, with the help of that photograph, that Sananda, who was Yogananda's brother, painted of Lahiri. And Lahiri didn't want any photographs taken of him. He thought, if you have a photograph, in the future, you'll just worship that and you won't do sadhana. So he didn't want his devotees to have a photograph, but they were not to be dissuaded. They wanted a photograph that they could have with them all the time, and they were praying to Lahiri to give his blessing on this venture. But they kept entreating him, and he finally agreed to it. So the devotees hired a photographer. His name was Gangadhar Babu. And Gangadhar Babu was elated and had all this setup made. And Yogaraj Lahiri was very childlike and inquiring, now how does this camera work, and what is this part and what is that part? And he was like distracting everybody from taking the photo. Eventually, at the time of taking the photo, Gangadhar Babu was faced with a strange problem. In the viewfinder of the camera, the image of Lahiri was not reflected. It would be like the camera is looking right at me, but you can't see me because the viewfinder of the camera is not reflecting my image. I wish I had that power, but I don't. So Gangadhar Babu thought that there must be some defect in the camera, But on examination, it was found that the images of anybody else who sat in that place was reflected. Just Lahiri was not reflected in the viewfinder. It was now that Gangadhar Babu understood the actual matter. He saw that Lahiri was smiling, and he prayed and folded his hands and said, "Kindly have mercy. Otherwise, the photograph cannot be taken, and the desire of the devotees cannot be fulfilled." Yogi Raj then gently said, "All right, take the picture." And when he said that, as soon as he said that, then his image came up in the viewfinder. The photograph which millions of his devotees possess today is the one which Gangadhar Babu took that day. And thank God that he did, so that we have this image that Sananda was able to paint from and paint this beautiful picture of Lahiri. So I will just briefly talk about Lahiri's passing. Yogi Raj was lying ill in bed, but like any other day, he would impart religious advice to his devotees, either lying down or sitting. And on that day of even being extremely unwell, he still expounded on the Gita in a low voice, but able to be heard by his devotees. Many devotees that day were listening, and in grave silence. Everyone was grief-stricken and tearful. There was a festival going on outside, and the music and commotion was going on, being wafted into the room by a breeze. The sun was about to set beneath the horizon for the day. The devotees asked with tearful eyes and quivering voices, "Yogi Raj, in your absence, we will become helpless. What will we do? What is our choice? What alternative do we have? We will be helpless." Yogi Raj assured them, "This immortal yoga sadhana of Kriya Yoga has been fostered by sages, and the ones who practice this will never become helpless. This yoga sadhana will never become extinct. It was existent always and will always exist. The more a man will advance towards spiritual fulfillment, the more interest towards this yoga sadhana will increase, because it is a scientific sadhana." Eyes half closed, fixed upwardly in transcendence, the devotees were addressed. He said, "The sublime and immortal yoga which has been obtained from Babaji and revived now will be practiced in every household in the future. And gradually man will proceed towards the path of salvation. As in the past, the path of salvation will become wider and wider as humanity evolves. Will be practiced, Kriya Yoga will be practiced in every household." Yogi Raj seated himself in Padmasana. Looking toward his tearful devotees, he remarked, "The time for my departure has come. Do not grieve. Though the mortal body disappears, I am always with you." It's so reminiscent of the words of Christ. "I will be with you till the end of time." And so it is with all of these great souls. They watch this human play. They know how we feel and what's happening with us, and they care about us. It's our job to open ourselves and become receptive to them so that they can work more in our lives, so that they can guide us better. We need the intuition to be able to follow them. And so let us practice this yoga sadhana until we can be one with their consciousness. Sri Krishna decreed in the Bhagavad Gita that whenever there is decadence, God incarnates in this world to resuscitate the waning glory of eternal yoga sadhana. And he showered his divine assurance in the Bhagavad Gita, which states, if one is encumbered by any impediment, that one whose burden it is, so we need to give whatever we're encumbered with to God, that one himself will release that burden. The one who perpetually thinks of God, that one has all of his actions performed by God. The more that we open ourselves to God, the more he works through us. So let us practice our yoga sadhana. Do you want to use the harmonium? Yeah. Why don't you turn off the harmonium mic so I can
It is
play
off.
the bells?
It is off. Sing a chant of Yogananda's. Wing has not touched my arms ever since I saw thee. Wing has not touched my arms ever since I saw thee. Without thee, my breath was not wanted. Without thee, my breath was not wanted. Wing has not touched my arms ever since I saw thee. Wing has not touched my hands ever since I saw thee. Thou didst say thou wouldst do thou hast never done. Thou didst say thou wouldst do thou hast never done. Restless is my soul, day and night. Restless is my soul, day and night. Does not touch my hand ever since I saw thee. Does not touch my hand ever since I saw thee. Without thee, earth was not wanted. Without thee, thy breath was not wanted. Thee has not touched my hand ever since
since I saw thee, wind has not touched my eyes. Ever since I saw thee, thou didst say thou wouldst come down as never. Thou didst say thou wouldst come down as never. Restless is my soul, day and night. 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 Has not touched my eyes since I saw thee. Ever since I saw thee, has not touched my eyes. Ever since I saw thee, has not touched my eyes. Ever since I saw thee. Every morning when I greet the sun, when I move forth the crowded ways, with my heart ever so silent, I will always think of thee. With my heart ever so silent, I will always think of thee. When I laugh, oh, and when I cry with me, when my best friends misunderstand, with my heart ever so silent, I will always think of thee. With my heart ever so silent, I will always think of thee. Dear God, come, I am not for eternity. Dear God, my God, I am not for eternity. Though my path lead me over desert sands, and they take me to bitter shores, with my heart, Lord, ever so silent, I will always think of thee. With my heart, Lord, ever so silent, I will always think of thee. When I'm working and when in earthly hosts that come victory or defeat, with my heart, Lord, ever so silent, I will always think of thee. With my heart, Lord, ever so silent, I will always think of thee. Dear God, I am not for eternity. Dear God, I am not for eternity. Dear God, I am thine for eternity. Dear God, I am thine for eternity. sweet, sweet chants. Thou art my life, thou art the sweet, sweet chants. You have called by my love, Lord. You have called by my love, Lord. I taste thy name, so sweet, so sweet. Never King knows how sweet you are. Never King knows how sweet you are. You know sweet like you know sweet like thou art my love, thou art the sweetest, sweet chance. Thou art my love, thou art the sweetest, sweet chance. In the call by my love, God, in the call by my love, God, I taste thy name, so sweet, so sweet. Everything knows how sweet you are. 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 You know sweet love. Thou art my love, thou art my love, thou art the sweetest, sweet chance. Thou art my love, thou art the sweetest, sweet chance. You have called by my love, God, you have called by my love. I taste thy name, so sweet, so sweet. Everything knows how sweet you are. 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 You know sweet you. You know everything knows how sweet you are. Everything knows how sweet you are. Everything knows how sweet you are. You know sweet Let's close chanting Om, sending out light and joy and harmony throughout this world.
Om. Peace. Amen. God bless you all. Jai Guru. Jai Lahiri.
Jai Guru Deva.
Push it right there.
Let me do it.
Push hard.